Welcome to Live the Dream with yours truly, Marty Kaiser. Buckle up and let's get started. Happy Friday, everyone. This is Marty Kaiser here with our Friday edition of our Real Estate Tidbits. Hope everyone's having a great week and looking forward to an awesome weekend. So as we're in December, I thought today would be a great day to kind of recap where we're at in the real estate market and to go over a lot of predictions based on statistical models for what we can expect in 2026 in the real estate market. Not only are you going to find that information interesting, but hopefully it can aid you in planning what your real estate objectives are in 2026. Whether you're thinking of buying, selling, whether you're thinking of renovating your property, or whether you're just going to maintain your status quo. These things will all guide you. Also may be helpful when you talk to family members or friends about telling them what you've heard and how that may impact what their decisions are. So what I always do, but in particular for this particular podcast, I went through a lot of the major forecasters and have basically combined their data. And I thought it was very interesting. Their data was similar, but some was a little bit different. So that's why on some of these metrics, you'll see me give you a range, because one big organization may have had a lesser projection than another organization. So I tried to give you an overview from lowest to best, and then you can kind of gather from there. So some of the data sources that I use, just to give you an idea, and these were in the major publications like USA Today, Money Watch, the Wall Street Journal, to name a few. And their information that they provided was based on the major real estate database companies such as Realtor.com, which is an arm of the National Association of Realtors, Zillow.com, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. It puts out a lot of real estate data in various forms. And Redfin, which is another big technology firm with a lot of data, just to name a few. So anyway, if you have any questions about the data, or you want to get more of a clarification, I can always be reached as always. Phone number is 407-595-9700, or my email address is marty@floridasales.com. And of course, this is Marty Kaiser with Better Homes and Gardens. So I thought one thing that was quite interesting in my research was that the forecast is up to 22 of the major cities in the U.S. in 2026. Their average or median prices are actually going to decrease somewhat. They feel that in those areas, that'll be due to a few variables relating to basically a lot of people are concerned about AI and their job losses, potential job losses. They're also uneasy with our current government, meaning that there's just a lot of uncertainty with our government, kind of erratic practices, the tariffs or lack thereof, what our posture is in some of these conflicts like in Ukraine and such. And some of the things that you hear about corruption or incompetence and like the Department of Defense, Pete Hegseth, continuing concern about his performance. And even the Republicans are now admitting that he's really not qualified for his position. So there's just a lot of uneasiness, and that's had an effect on some of these real estate projections for 2026. Now, the good news for buyers is that the predictions are that there'll be a more buyer-friendly and balanced market. And we've seen that trend in 2025, but it's expected to be more pronounced in 2026. So buyers should hopefully have a better selection of inventory opportunities, and they'll be able to be a little bit more aggressive in their negotiating posture. Interest rates in total for the year 2025 had an approximate average of 6.6%. And that's expected to decrease a little bit in 2026 to an average of 6 to 6.3%. Now, there may be bleeps where for a short period of time, like could be as short as a few days or a couple weeks, that interest with certain lenders may go below 6, but it's expected that the average for 2026 will be 6.3%. Now, the market that's going to suffer the most price-wise is expected to be in 2026 the South and the West. A lot of the warm weather climates or the coastal climates. Now, interestingly, out of the 8 largest Florida cities, it's expected that 7 of them will decline in prices. The largest predicted decline will be in the Fort Lauderdale, Cape Coral, West Palm Beach areas, and it's expected that price decreases in those areas could be above 10%. So that's pretty significant. The one area, interestingly, that these different organizations that provide this statistical data disagree about is Miami. One of the metric organizations has Miami's prices being among the largest decreases. Another metrics organization says that Miami prices will somewhat increase in 2026. So that was the only one of significant variation. So for people thinking or buying or selling in Miami, they'll just have to carefully watch the local market there. And of course, I always recommend to people, regardless of what area you're thinking of buying or selling in, I'm biased, of course, but I think it's important that you work with a skilled and experienced agent that can put you on the best path to achieve your objectives at the same time while basing their plan of attack for you based on their knowledge of the market and their assessment of trend analysis. Because every area, as I've mentioned in previous podcasts, is a little different. And within each city, certain segments in the city are going to be stronger or weaker than others. Now, it's predicted that our real estate market over the next few years is going to experience what they refer to as a long, gradual recovery. So it won't be anything that we experienced in 2021 and 22, where we had just crazy price increases and inventory shortages due in large measure to COVID. This should be more gradual. Historically, when we're in kind of what I call traditional markets, especially in Florida, which is obviously what I practice in, most years' appreciation would be in the range of 3 to 4%. So that would be what I would consider kind of a gradual recovery. You know, some years it might be a little bit lower at 1 or 2%. Other years maybe a little bit higher at 4 to 5%. But it's going to be more predictable, and I think that may give a lot of consumers more peace of mind. Now, the sister of the sales are going to be rents. They feel that rents will be relatively flat in the next couple of years. So hopefully that's going to be a good thing because rents have gotten so much higher over the past 5 years that it's made living in a lot of areas not as affordable for people as you would like, especially people that are just, what I would call normal working folks. They've been putting more of their income forward toward rent than they probably should have. So hopefully this rental stability will be a good boon for them. One of the reasons why they feel that rents will be a lot flatter is because of the tighter immigration policies. And that's going to impact more of the warm weather coastal climates, which of course is Florida and California and to a little lesser degree, Arizona. Now, interestingly, new construction has been significantly impacted by all of the turbulence we've experienced. So it's projected by all the major statistical or metric organizations that new construction will be at its weakest in 2026, and it'll be the weakest since 2019, pre-COVID. And so what you're going to find, according to the predictions, is that there'll be greater selection of new properties, probably flatter prices, and there'll be less construction starts. So those are all things that everybody should keep an eye out for. I think that there was enough uniformity in these big organizations that, other than the Miami variation and where they varied a little bit in their predictions for pricing and existing home sales, like for example, the existing home sales range from about 2 to 4% in terms of an increase in volume over 2025. Prices, on the other hand, had a variation of a price increase, and these are national statistics, of 1.2% to about 4%. So there was a little bit of a variation there. It was pretty universally agreed to that Florida and California would probably be a little bit more negatively impacted by some of the things that we're experiencing. Now, for example, the strongest areas pretty much uniformly were projected to be the Northeast and some parts in the Midwest. The Northeast, believe it or not, even though there's a lot of volatility, but they expected that the states that would do the best in appreciation would be New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Illinois. And one outlier that doesn't fit with those four states, believe it or not, is Mississippi. Now, this is just a personal observation on me about that, is I think probably Mississippi will have greater appreciation than some of the other adjacent Florida states, because their average price there was probably among the lowest in the South. And so that may be one of the reasons. But it's interesting about New York in particular, because obviously we've got the controversial mayor who's going to be taking office in 2026. And of course, it's predicted that he's called like a socialist mayor with a lot of hope for assistance programs for less affluent people, and a lot of what is referred to as giveaway programs. Unfortunately, the challenge, if you think that his ideas are good, is that there's probably not going to be funds allocated by the state of New York for a lot of his projects. So New York's going to be an interesting state to kind of keep an eye on in 2026. Some of the other housing markets in the Midwest that are expected to have solid years are going to be Cleveland, Ohio, St. Louis, Missouri, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Madison, Wisconsin. Relating to what they feel is going to be the migration of newly graduated folks from our universities, they feel they're more likely to move to small and mid-sized cities where they can find more affordable rent. You know, one thing that you're finding statistically, which is interesting and a little bit of a cause of concern, I would say, not only for the economy, but for just the average person's life aspirations, is that the average age of our first-time home buyers is significantly increasing, and supposedly it's going to be around 40 years of age, which is much older than it had been before. And I don't think that's a good thing. That's caused by a lot of different things: the volatility in our economy, the erratic job market, people's lower expectations of the future of the United States. And I think that a lot of people that grew up during the housing meltdown in 2010 and 11 experienced seeing how their parents had to deal with that. So they're more cautious about entering the housing market. And also, I think a lot of our younger folks in the 20s and early 30s, they don't want to be tied down as much. They want to do more traveling. So for them, having a real estate investment ties them down and may limit their financial ability to travel as much. So that's interesting. Now, other cities that are expected to have more significant downturns beyond the cities in Florida that I mentioned are two in Texas, Austin, Texas, and San Antonio, and then one in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee. And some of the additional reasons they gave for those areas having downturns are the climate, meaning the natural disasters like the floods, hurricanes, things of that nature. Also, we're starting to experience, and it's predicted, that we will have a continual diminishing of remote workers. So people relocating back to their offices is also going to affect housing. And so those are some of the major adjustments. The other thing that they're finding is that in our coastal areas, or the areas that have more of the weather variations, rising insurance cost is another negative factor that affects the price of housing and, of course, the demand for housing. Especially people that want to live closer or on the water, insurance prices are generally pretty unaffordable. So that's a little bit of the statistical data that I've come up with. Hopefully you'll find that quite helpful. I use this just more from myself as an interest factor. I don't base my daily activities with my customers. I don't use that data other than to give them a little guidance. I do think 2026 in Orlando will be a great year for people to purchase, because we'll get that continued slight diminish or slight price reduction of interest rates. And the housing prices, I think, in Orlando will stay reasonably flat. I think Orlando, the one thing Orlando is great about compared to most of these cities is that it's an area that people are continually relocating to. And because we have such varied segments here, you have the people buying their second homes, you have the people looking for short-term rental properties, whether it's for investment or personal use. And then, of course, you have, people that are looking to break that rental mold and get a foothold in the real estate market. So all those things, I think, will have an effect. Another piece of information that I've researched that's good news is that it's projected that fewer owners will be underwater as prices stabilize. So meaning that in the last couple of years, for people that had bought more recently, there was a lot of concern that their houses were worth less than what they paid for them because they bought them at the peak, and then the market's been adjusting for the last couple of years. So hopefully that's a good thing, not only from a practical point of view, but it may put a more positive spin on how people look at things. And the last thing is they're finding that lifestyles will emerge as a force, especially with renters, not as much with purchasers. And some of the things they see with renters are that renters are going to want continued mobility in terms of where they locate at. They want to. A lot of our younger folks don't want to have the home maintenance burdens, and so they're looking for more of the turnkey rental operations. And a lot of times they like to be in the newer properties where things go wrong less, and they have more, whether it's high-speed internet or more fitness-related facilities, things of that nature. And interestingly, even if interest rates continue to drop, only about 37% of renters say they would buy, which is down from 45% of last year. So that's kind of an interesting statistic, and not a great one, quite honestly, but it is what it is. And also, the last thing that affects rental demand is how many people have a child in the home that's younger than 18. And that's gone up from a year ago, too. So all those things have an effect. So it's interesting just to keep an eye on this. The last big thing that I see, which everybody predicts is going to have a huge impact on life in not only America but in other countries, is AI. How will it evolve? We obviously know AI is going to have more of an influence. The concern is twofold with AI, loss of jobs, and also is it going to be used for more good than bad. You're already seeing a lot of bogus things posted with AI, and as the technology improves, it's going to be harder and harder to differentiate between AI-generated falsehoods and what's real information. So that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on. So that's basically all the real estate data I'm going to give. I'll transition to my last segment, which will be a little bit of a sports update. And the college playoffs should be announced next week for college football. That's going to be interesting to follow. And like I said in my last podcast last week, it's pretty much wide open. So we'll see. Big news in college football was the Lane Kiffin saga. Lane Kiffin is a football coach that was at the University of Mississippi, and he was the number one coach in demand. He was approached by University of Florida, by Louisiana State University, and covertly by Florida State University. And he ended up taking the job at LSU. And his team at Mississippi is going to be in the college playoffs. And unfortunately, he's not able to coach his players because since he's taken a new job, they didn't want him in the program anymore, which is understandable. College football has gotten to be worse than pro football, with just the money being the overriding thing, both for players and students, and it's sad. But it is what it is, and that's not going to change in the near future. He supposedly got a record contract of approximately 7 years in the range of $85 to $100 million. So a lot of money to coach football, but football is all about money, and if the coach wins, they get a lot of money, and if they lose, they get unceremoniously fired, just like the pros. Relating to the pros are on their last quarter of the year. All the divisions are wide open. Last night they had a really good game. Detroit beat Dallas. So Dallas is kind of on the precipice of being unlikely to make the NFL playoffs. Detroit is still on the outside looking in, but a lot of our experts feel they will make the playoffs because they do have a really good team. Our local team, Tampa Bay and Jacksonville, are both playoff contenders this year. Jacksonville's tied for their lead in their division. Hopefully our Tampa team, which has been besieged by injuries in 2025, they're starting to have some of their key players heal up. So we'll keep an eye on them. So that's all for sports today. One last tidbit. We're going to have a little bit more of a social media presence in 2026. In fact, we're going to start next week. So keep an eye out on all your major social media, Facebook, Instagram, all the things that you typically look at. We're not going to bore you. We're not going to have goofy things about what our kids are doing in school. It'll be little blurbs about real estate or maybe sports. And we'll try to keep it entertaining, interesting, and keep it brief. Even though I love to talk, I know that you guys have better things to do with your life, so my social media will be short and sweet. So that's all for today. Have a great weekend. If you have anybody that's interested in getting more real estate information or might want to purchase or sell, please keep me in mind. One thing I guarantee is expertise, results, and no BS. This is Marty Kaiser out.